Hey, I'm here again at Gracie Schwartzwald with Erkan Mete, and we wanted to discuss something that happened recently, which was, of course, we use Jiu-Jitsu in here all the time. You can use it at tournaments, but the reason most people start Jiu-Jitsu is to learn to defend themselves. Okay, and that's why we focus so much on the type of Jiu-Jitsu that we do, which is primarily self-defense focused versus, we teach it all, but versus competition being our primary focus, self-defense is our primary focus.
That's right.
And so we had a situation where Erkan actually had to use his jiu-jitsu in a physical conflict. And he came in and told us about it. I thought it'd be something we wanted to talk about and kind of give you his viewpoint about what happened, how he was able to use jiu-jitsu, what he felt like he got from it in this physical conflict, and the results of everything that happened. So why don't you kind of give us a quick overview of what actually occurred?
It was pretty easy. So it was approximately 1 o'clock in the night. A friend of mine called me to take him to work, and arriving there, we saw a guy pushing around his girlfriend. So, and there were some 2 or 3 bystanders. Nobody was doing something. So I get out of the car. My friend get out of the car, and I approached the guy and tried to pull him away from his girlfriend. And then he turned to me and tried to grab me, and that's then the point where I start reflexively, without thinking, defend myself, put him to the ground.
Okay. So as we go on, one thing I want to ask, what did he try to grab you with?
It was a headlock kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, so this is something we talk about all the time. I will hear from people in the jiu-jitsu community who are more can focus on sport, and they'll say, well, we don't learn to defend headlocks because nobody good does them, meaning other BJJ people don't tend to do them. And we train to defend them all the time because, as I say, if you get in a physical conflict, and I'm talking about self-defense, the number one thing people try to do to hit you is going to be a right hand, big power right hand, and the other thing they're going to try to do is grab you in a headlock. And if you don't learn how to defend them, yeah, you may figure your way out, but the idea is always to have a trained response. I don't tell my students to figure their way out of a footlock. Why would I tell them to figure their way out of the most common attack in a self-defense situation? Again, given enough time, a sport guy can get his way out, but he may already be on the ground, he may be taking punches, all sorts of things. So he goes for this sort of headlock type thing. And then what happened?
So I controlled his arm, ducked under, get to back control.
Because we've worked a lot of duck unders.
Yes. Yeah, it was because I worked it a lot in the last couple of days because of the purple belt curriculum.
Right.
Trained a lot of duck under, so it was a reflex to duck under, got at his back and clinched him from behind.
And then, so we have our 6 aspects of jiu-jitsu that we teach here, right? And one of the big ones that we focus on a lot, that I would say a lot of jiu-jitsu schools don't do, and some don't do at all, is clinch work.
Yes.
Right? We do a lot of clinch work because in a self-defense situation or in a fight situation that isn't like a organized MMA type situation or boxing, after a few seconds or maybe even immediately, people will grab you. And if you don't know how to break the clinch or fight within the clinch, as I always say, if you can't get the fight to the ground, your groundwork won't help you. And if you can't get up off the ground, your groundwork won't save you. But even then, we don't necessarily want to go to the ground. We can, but the idea is you can put yourself in an advantageous position here. So anyway, you slip to the back, and then you probably did, a blast double, or sotogari.
Yeah, and some chain punches.
Flying heel hook, or what did you do?
So I was in the back clinch, and when I was there, it was like a short moment where I think, oh, this is familiar to me, so it doesn't feel bad. So, and I did, to be honest, I did the takedown, which in training, I don't like that much.
Right.
Which is the hip fold takedown, but it works like a charm.
Yeah, this is one takedown that not a lot of people, even when they train takedowns, use. And we teach it a lot because if it doesn't work, you haven't really lost anything, right? And it's such a simple takedown that when you take somebody down with it, you kind of end up in a very good position.
Very
right?
stable, still standing.
Yeah, and it takes very little effort. Right now, in here, if you try to do this hip fold takedown to say Julian or Georg, you can have a little bit of trouble with it. One, because they know it.
And they have a good base.
And they have a good base. And they're also not fighting you in the way that somebody who wants to fight you would, right? He was probably trying to either pull away or push into you, if you even remember. But you said it was.
I think he was pushing into me, and I stepped back and do the hip fold,
right?
And I remember correctly. But he was directly in front of my leg, so I didn't have to chase him or something.
And that's another thing we focus on, right?
Yeah.
Versus sometimes with takedowns, you learn takedowns in the way of a judoka or the way of a sambo person or a way of a wrestler, where it's more about getting the person to the ground rather than getting the person to the ground in a control position, right? Meaning if I do a tomonaga, I can launch you halfway across the room, and if you land on your back, I win the match. But we focus a lot on when we take somebody down, just dropping them right in front of us. So they immediately go into control. This is something I tell you guys all the time, right?
Yes.
Don't throw the person halfway across the room, because then you got to chase them, like you said.
And it was not a real throw. I mean, I just laid him to the ground.
A takedown, a pull down.
Yeah, I pulled him down and laid him down in a very relaxed and non-threatening, non-dangerous way.
Right.
So it didn't hurt him. He doesn't hit his head on the ground or something.
Right. And then what happened?
So then he turned to me, and I mounted him immediately and make a big base.
Right.
And controlled him there. But it wasn't a long control, because he tried to push me and tried to turn away. Right. So I had the technical back, how we call it.
Right.
Then after that.
Yeah, so you go into a further control position. And something I want to back up a little bit is, during this whole time, your heart was probably beating 100 miles per hour, and you're scared and you're sweating.
Not really. That was, I don't know if it was too fast or it was just too familiar to me, because it wasn't different than what I do on a Wednesday evening in training.
Right.
I had a little bit of heart bump, but it was controllable. It was not, oh, I don't know what to do, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
Maybe I was a little bit safe feeling because my friend was there watching my back.
Right.
It was totally okay with that, so it wasn't that much of a bad feeling.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to a few things, right? Which is, jiu-jitsu is a combative art, right? We spar all the time, right? We roll all the time. So like you said, you know, if you train a martial art where you do kind of the kata or the, you know, you throw a punch and I know exactly what to do, and then you actually get in a fight and it doesn't go like that, right? You start panicking, right? But more than that, the one thing I certainly preach, and we preach here at the school, is a lot of martial arts, they tell you when the violence happens, your goal is to be the most overwhelming violent force in the conflict, right? Which is the exact opposite of what we say, right? Because if you were, you know, you're not 6'2", 300 pounds, you're a normal person, right? And if you didn't have training, and you weren't athletic, and you used up all your force and you didn't win the fight, what happens now? You're completely exhausted.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
We have a lot of people come in here, what happens when they roll the first time? Within a minute, they're just dead, right? Because they threw all their force at it. And yet so many martial arts will tell you to do that, right? And especially if there's a big size or strength disparity, you tell a woman who's 110 pounds to just go nuts and punch and kick. All she's done now is make herself tired and made the other person very angry.
Not just that, but I think when I try to punch my way out, being aggressive, I think I will be more afraid.
Right.
Afraid of hurting him, afraid of getting him angry, afraid of losing power, afraid of maybe the aftermath, maybe things I don't think about during the fight. But I think I'm not a person who can beat someone to pulp. It's not my personality.
But the thing that I want to come back to, and that's we'll touch on that for sure, is the fact that, you know, one, we don't set timers here when we roll, right? And so our jiu-jitsu is much more focused on, I would say, sort of intelligent movements, right? Like working when we're in a dominant position, grinding our way to a finish versus just jumping and hoping. And then when we're in a bad position, you know, maybe you get stuck under somebody for 10 minutes. What does that train you to do? To learn to relax, to be calm, And that's one of, I think, the best things you ever get from jiu-jitsu is if you train, is learning to be calm in the scenario. So the violent conflict happened, you were like, this is completely familiar, and your training wasn't, now I gotta go super hard and start, because if you start overwhelming and trying to do all that, you're not making intelligent decisions anymore, right?
Yes,
you're almost
yes.
kind of animalistic in your attack, and people tell you, yeah, try to do this and rip out the eyes and kick the balls and do all that. And versus like what you didn't get out of control, you made intelligent decisions, which meant you didn't get hurt, he didn't get hurt.
That's right.
If
yeah.
you had taught yourself to be extremely violent, you probably would have started elbowing him in the face, smashing his head on the ground, and then what's the next stage that happens? Maybe the police get involved.
Yes.
Right? Or like you said, you feel bad, right? The guy goes to the hospital, he's lost all his teeth and everything. And I'm not saying he's a good guy, he shouldn't deserve to be punished, but you know, you don't want to hurt somebody if you have the option not to, as well as hurting yourself, right? You miss a punch, you hit the ground, or you hit his head here, you break your hand. So yeah, I mean, we teach striking and defending strikes, but our primary goal is control. Jiu-Jitsu is an art of control, as we say here all the time. It's not a submission art. So you got the guy into control, and like I said, I just can kind of picture just like, this is a no stripe white belt at that point, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You feel that. He give you his arm. I didn't arm lock him.
Right.
He tried to turn away.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you went to
the technical mount, technical back. That's how we call it.
Right.
I was then in that position, and he tried to turn on his knees, but I didn't allow that.
So you mounted him, and he first tried to maybe push you.
Yes, I got away.
Which is what they all do, right?
Yes.
Okay, now, we train with the gi all the time and without the gi. So we're very good at both.
Yes.
But he had a jacket, right?
Yeah, he had a jacket.
Sometimes people go, oh, I only train in booty shorts and no shirt because I want to train for the streets. And I always say, well, who will you be fighting if you're fighting guys who are only wearing shorts and no t-shirt or no clothes? We do both, but since he has a jacket, especially here in Germany.
Yeah, and his jacket was open, and he tried to go on his knees, and I pulled him a little bit back and stopped him with my body, positioned my arm and feed it.
Is if you train a martial art that's focused on control, what we call the variability of response, right? Could you have beaten him up?
I could, yeah.
Could you have maybe grabbed a weapon and started beating him?
Yes.
So, or could you have just controlled him, or in this situation, go to a more advanced form of control, put him to sleep, the most kind way you can end a fight, and the most reliable way you can end a fight. You maybe punch the guy, maybe he's on drugs and that's just not doing anything.
Yes.
So, unlike a lot of martial arts, say boxing or something, where you really have one response to a violent conflict, we have a number of responses. So we can go up and down the threat ladder, right? You could have broken his arm. You could have elbowed him in unconsciousness or worse. But did you have to think about this?
No, that was the issue. After that, I was like, oh, hopefully he's good. Hopefully he's okay. Because it was just an automatic reaction. I didn't think about it.
Right.
I was just, in a short moment, I was thinking when he tried to push me to arm lock him, but I didn't want to give up the good position I had.
Right, which we preach all the time, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I saw that, and it was immediately.
Now, I want to go over one quick thing, because one of the things you know is I'm very picky about how collar chokes are done, right? And that's why when I do them, or my students do them, people are surprised by how powerful they are. So you went, and you notice he's very good about, as I turn, he pulled back, and we do our 1, 2, 3. A lot of people kind of skip steps. They just kind of reach for the collar, or they just open and then reach here, and there's space. You could still get the choke, right? But it would probably take a lot longer. It happened very fast, right? Because you went 1, 2. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember how I put my hand in position before I feed the jacket.
Something we really preach is not reaching for the collar, but putting your hand in position and bringing the collar to your hand. And so he went to sleep pretty quickly.
Pretty quickly. Maybe I have a time disorientation, but it was, for me, it was 2 or 3 seconds and he was gone.
So, you know, this comes down to sort of something we train. And when I say you should train this, I don't mean once every 6 months or once in a special class that your instructor gives on self-defense. You should be training standing techniques every single class. That means clinch work. That means standing self-defense. That means striking. That means takedowns. We train that every single class. It's not a separate part. Mm-hmm. When my students roll, the ones that have only trained with me, they just consider when they roll that starting standing is just natural, right? Sometimes they'll start on the ground if they're not feeling good, but it's not like a separate art to them, right? It's part. And so you were, the guy just went for a headlock and you did the takedown. That wasn't something that you learned those one class out of every 2 months.
No, we do that every day.
Every day. And then the groundwork, of course, was
very
simple. And the other thing too is because we do an art of control, his responses were predictable, right? Mm-hmm. When you focus so much on just pure, let's say, striking or something like that, the responses are very unpredictable, right? You don't know if he's going to headbutt you, if he's going to try to tackle you, if he's going to elbow you. And actually an untrained striker is, in a lot of ways, more difficult to deal with, right? At least with a trained striker, you know that this is probably going to be followed by this, probably going to be followed by this. But once you get control, you have him in technical mount. What's he going to do? Is he going to roll away or roll to his back again?
Yep.
Right? And you were ready for both. Because when you rolled away, what'd you do? You caught the shoulder, pulled him back, right? And then right into the choke. Now, he goes to sleep. And this is something people ask me all the time, like, oh, won't that kill somebody? No. Yes, of course, in any sort of physical conflict, something crazy could happen. He has a heart problem, he has something. But if you let go of the choke, again, it's probably the nicest way you can end the fight. He comes to in a few seconds.
Yeah, it wasn't that long. Right. And his friends came out then and picked him up and put him in the car.
Right.
His girlfriend was a little bit angry. She was like, oh, he's dying. So, no, he's not. And I was a little bit afraid too, because I choked the person out in the street.
Right. But the thing is too is that, and again, we're not trying to say, oh, you should care about a violent attacker. But again, so many martial arts, they kind of sell you this movie idea of like, you're going to go in, beat this person up, knock this person out, and somehow there's going to be no legal problems after that, right? So because you did this, there's a few things, right? If the police did show up, it'd be very hard to prove that you did something, right?
That's right, yeah.
Because there's no like bruises and broken anything.
Nothing.
But two, do you think that if you had beaten him up and broken his eye or something like this, what do you think the chances are that he'd maybe want to get revenge? Not high, but there's a good chance, right? If somebody beat me up like that, there's a part of every man that would be like, I'm going to get that dude back.
Yeah.
But you choke a guy out and...
Accident.
Yeah, they can even act like, I don't know what happened, but...
Yeah. I feel better going home after that, because he woke up and everything was good. I didn't hurt him, I didn't hurt me, I was not violent.
Right.
And I think when I reacted in a violent way, I will be like that when I go home. I was pretty relaxed after that. For me, it was, I tried to calm him down. I calmed him down with a choke at the end, but it was not a fight.
Yeah. It was a fight for him maybe, but not for you. For you it was
a Wednesday night.
A Wednesday night, a short sparring session, right? A short rolling session. So, but here's the thing, right? So this is something that's important to understand about this. I've heard so many people, one of the great fallacies, there's a lot that you hear in Jiu-Jitsu, and people repeat them without actually thinking it through. One is, one of the ones is, Gordon Ryan doesn't need the self-defense techniques. Yeah, of course he doesn't, right? Neither does a football player, right? But what do you tell a person who's not a freak athlete in order to defend themselves? You need to get them trained techniques in order to defend themselves, not, don't get me wrong, we learn kind of the exotic BJJ stuff too, but for real life life and death self-defense type situations or real violent situations, you want to have an actual trained response. Duck under. These weren't things that you made up on the spot.
No, it's trained reflexes.
That put into your body, right? We call it mushin.
Yeah,
right?
Trained a lot.
But the other thing too is that when you remembered it and then forgot it again. Okay. But the other fallacy you will hear a lot of times is, I don't need martial arts because I don't put myself in dangerous places, right? Or I don't go out looking for fights. Both are incredibly inane arguments. One, nobody attacks you because you went out looking for a fight. Well, I mean, of course, you can go out and get looking for a fight. But people, when they attack you, it's, you know, my mom used to say, oh, you know, have a fight, both people have to be involved. Well, no. Maybe for a fight, but not for an attack, right? So this person is beating up his girlfriend. You know, do you think she was also fighting him? They agreed, like, let's go out in the parking lot and beat it out? No, right? And so if you think that, like, you can just avoid being in a fight by saying, oh, no, thank you, I don't want to be in this fight against somebody who wants to do you harm, you're living in a fantasy. But the other thing is, if you want to say, well, you know, I'm just going to avoid all conflicts and keep myself in a very safe world, that's great. But what do you do if you need to protect somebody else? Right? So you've never learned to protect yourself. It also means you will not ever be able to protect anybody else. In this case, it was a stranger, but it could just as well be, you know, a family member, a friend.
Yes.
Right? And if you go, oh, you see your friend getting beaten up, you're like, well, good luck, because I can't do anything to help you. Mm-hmm. You know, maybe I'll call the police, and hopefully within half an hour they'll be here. But having simple tools that you can go in and do this. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the thing that was most surprising was just kind of how easy it all was.
Yeah, so right? Familiar. So it wasn't different like a sparring session.
Right. Yeah. And that's just it, again, like, because we train this every day, right? I mean, as I always say, like, the Jiu-Jitsu kind of gives you a superpower in the sense that if you do, you know, some other martial arts, and a guy walks in the door, has no experience, but he's athletic, can he, if you're boxing, can he hit you a few times?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe he can get lucky and really knock you down. Somebody comes in here, they don't know anything, and they roll with you, trying to submit you or hurt you, and you're, say, a blue belt in here, what's the chance of that happening?
Very, very small.
Very, very small, right? Not because necessarily of the art situation, but because our art is focused on control. So we take away his ability to hurt us, rather than try to have a better ability to hurt him while trying to maybe get lucky and avoid him hurting us. So do you have anything you want to add to all this? Your feelings or your experiences about it, or your thoughts on it?
I'm pretty happy that we train all that I was not thinking what I'm doing. It was just reacting.
And we call that what?
Mushin.
Right.
We call it mushin, right?
Yeah. It means you can't think, right, about what you're doing. So if you only train to move and you know, oh, there was this thing I learned once, what was it? It's not going to happen, right? It has to be muscle memory, as we say.
I think the throw itself was muscle memory, because I told you I don't really like the throw. But because I trained it so much in the last couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks for the curriculum, for the purple belt curriculum, it happened so as a basic. And you know, I didn't hurt my knees or something. I shouldn't. I wasn't on the ground with my knees for the throw.
Yeah, for this throw, we don't drop down or slam ourselves onto the ground or anything. It's such an easy takedown. Yeah,
maybe we will show the takedown.
Yeah, sure.
How it happened. So he was. I approached him from this side, and he was pushing here around. And I turned him, and he wanted to headlock me. So I blocked, ducked under, was in the back clinch.
Now, normally and we teach this, don't get me wrong, we absolutely teach many different options. But the traditional Gracie one is the rear trip, right?
The rear trip, yes. We teach that one.
We both go to the ground on that.
Yeah, but I didn't want it to go to the ground.
Right, because you're also in an area you don't know what's on the ground or what's around.
That's right. It was dark at night. I didn't know anything. So I was here, so I stepped back with my back leg and just pressed him down. And he turned to me, so I mounted him immediately.
Tried to push you.
He pushed me away. I let him go and pulled him back, open, bam. And it was a very, very short fight. Or not a fight, but a very, very short defense.
And again, these are all things that we train to defend because they are all the most common reactions from people, right?
Yes.
Right. Get you stand up. Right. we learn it all, but honestly, this kind of reaction where I'm going to drop, start going here and here,
Yeah.
all this, learning how to defend against that, that's fun and all.
Uh-huh.
But
And you
it's
train it.
you train it the idea of actually having to use that
Yeah.
in a situation, or, you know, somebody coming up and maybe doing
Yeah.
I'm not picking any other martial art, but a lot of them, they eventually get to where, just BJJ too, where it's focused on defending itself,
Yes.
right? And we always have what we call in our fundamentals and what we train all the time, we call it what?
Jiu-Jitsu versus the world.
Yeah, which means Jiu-Jitsu versus the attacks you're actually going to really deal with, you know, punches and headlocks and tackles and things like that, and clinches, people grabbing you. And that's our primary focus. The other stuff, we absolutely train it. But I would much rather have somebody who can defend a headlock, get an easy takedown, get control, versus somebody who can't do those things, but maybe can get out of a heel hook. Because one, you lose a tournament, maybe. Two, you lose a street fight, which means the person can keep injuring you as long as they want.
Yes.
Versus in a tournament, maybe, you know, the ref will stop the fight. So, anyway, I was just really happy to hear that you were able to kind of easily handle this. And again, your response when you came in, he was very casual. He was like, "Hey, guys, he didn't do any of that." He was like, "Oh, did I tell you?" Had a situation the other night. I took the guy down and choked him out. And it's just so casual because, again, it's like you say, it's how often do we do that in here, right?
That's right. And you know, it is. I did Jiu-Jitsu to defend myself.
Right.
It was not a mix from something. It was pure Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
I didn't need any. I'm experienced in different kinds of martial arts.
Course,
You know
yeah.
that I'm very. I practiced Wing Chun for years,
Right.
Filipino martial arts, Jeet Kune Do, Muay Thai.
Yep.
And I didn't have to mix the styles up to defend myself. It was just pure Jiu-Jitsu. I didn't need any help from outside the style.
And why is that?
Because it's a complete system, in my opinion.
Well, when it's taught as a complete
Yes,
system,
when
right?
it's taught as a
Yeah,
complete
you
system.
see a lot of people say, well, you need to do jiu-jitsu, you need to add in these other things. And it's, don't get me wrong, it's nice to get better at striking and get better at takedowns. But the way we try to practice it is that you don't need those other things. That jiu-jitsu, again, for us, isn't just groundwork.
No.
That's a small portion of it.
That's right.
So yeah, you didn't that's a really good point. You didn't have to blend it with other things.
Because it's incomplete. It is not.
Right, it's not.
Yeah, because we train here as a complete art.
Right. Well, anyway, really happy to hear that. It's always really good to hear a story like this if for no other reason than, you know, when we teach, like especially the self-defense and the clinch work and stuff, it's really great when you come in here and you like roll with somebody, you go, "Hey man, I tapped out this guy," or "I got the takedown on this guy." But when it works in a situation where you're like, okay, that could have been a potentially deadly encounter, or certainly very violent encounter, and it was, in a lot of ways, it was even easier, right? Because the guy has no idea what he's doing.
That's right.
That doesn't mean that they're not dangerous,
They can be dangerous.
right? Because, again, how many jiu-jitsu schools do you think regularly train to defend punches or to fight within the clinch?
Not
very,
that
very
many,
few, right?
Yeah.
And so if the guy is good at those things and you never train it, well, he's trained and you're not. That's something I say all the time, right? If you don't know how to block a punch and you're fighting a guy on the street and he's really good at throwing just a good punch, yeah, you're the white belt. He's the advanced guy. But the fact that it was so casual for you that you just kind of mentioned it in passing.
God bless.
And as
Yeah,
soon as
I
heard
was
it, like,
lucky.
Wait a minute, we got to talk about this.
Yeah, I was lucky with that. I mean, you know, he was pretty angry.
Yeah.
So if I did mess up,
Right.
oh,
for sure.
he will beat me to
If he,
a pulp.
if he had been able to get a hold of you and start,
Yeah, and start and putting me to the ground and kicking me. He
Right.
was pretty angry on
or
his
if you
girlfriend.
both had really started just going,
Yeah.
you're quite a good striker.
Yeah,
but
I'm a
again,
good striker.
You never know what can happen.
He was maybe a head taller than I am. He had a way different reach.
And that's the other thing too, right? Is you know, a lot of martial arts where they tell you kind of overwhelm the person, or even sadly a lot of jiu-jitsu now where it's like your jiu-jitsu is not working. What do you need to do? Go to the gym, get stronger, faster. Or a lot of jiu-jitsu that's based on like I got to be the fastest guy in the room. And the problem is that's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
Right? If you get into conflict, it's probably going to be somebody bigger, stronger than you.
Yeah.
And so if you fought him on what we call fair terms, right? But the fact that our jiu-jitsu, I always tell my students, my goal is to maximize my power and minimize their power. Take away all their options and take away all their power. And so that was easy because, like, you know, when you're in here, sometimes you roll and the guy stands up and you're like, oh, I didn't realize you're that big.
Yeah.
But because we work so much on control and taking away power, you know, it doesn't feel that way. So that's, yeah. So, great story, great experience. Really want to thank you for sharing that. And if you are interested in, you know, learning Jiu-Jitsu, which we firmly believe, and we both have experience in many martial arts, is the most effective self-defense art there is, I would say be sure to, you know, find a school and ask them, you know, do you teach everything regularly? Do you teach the self-defense? Do you teach the takedowns? Not once in a while, but the whole complete art. And of course, you can always write me or Erkan or write us at Gracie Schwartzwald and ask us any questions you have. And again, I want to thank you for taking the time and telling
Thank
about
you
this
for
experience.
teaching me.
Yeah.
You teach me, so I was able to defend myself on a very humane art.
Yeah. All right, thanks, guys.